It was 1942, the height of the Second World War, when a group of friends met in neutral Portugal and, presumably over a glass or two of something, started talking about the state of the port wine industry.
Shipments were at an all-time low because of the war, and there was a large surplus of grapes in the Douro region up in the north, where port is made. The idea was to make table wines and export them to Brazil.
They rented a winery from the local cooperative and weren't going to be put off by a lack of knowledge about making or selling wine. After a wobbly start, the company, which would become Sograp, created an easy-drinking, sweet rosé, put it in a bottle shaped like a wartime water canteen, and bought the name of a nearby stately home, which they stuck on the label.
Mateus Rosé was born, and it flooded the world. Elton John sang about getting juiced on it. Jimmy Hendrix swigged it from a bottle. And even the Queen of England was partial to the occasional tipple, although mostly from a glass. It was one of the most popular wines in the 1960s and 70s.
Particularly in the UK, which was starting to get a taste for wine. It was sweet, it was sophisticated, it was aimed at women, and the bottle made a great candle holder. Riding high, the company made acquisitions in the best wine regions of Portugal, the Douro, Vinho Verde and the Alentejo, and then bought vineyards around the world.
Run away from home tonight with Mateus. The rosé wine that's like a trip to Portugal.
From the very beginning, Sograp was about marketing.
Portugal. Climb the cobbled streets of yesterday.
Something that continues to this day.
Foi aventureiro e ergueu uma marca de peso no Alentejo.
They've carefully woven the story of Alentejo into their wines.
Deu tempo à terra, tempo à natureza.
The Black Pig and Oak Tree labels are some of the most well-known brands from this region. And it's this episode's obsession. Isn't that a nice sound?
It's a great sound.
There it is. Welcome to the latest instalment of Anna and Al's Big Portuguese Wine Adventure. Today we're meeting one of the Alentejo's top winemakers, Luís Cabral de Almeida.
We are investing a lot to put that beauty of Alentejo, simplicity, in the bottle.
And we're heading into the fields for the harvest. There's the traditional way of doing it.
And then there's the more modern approach.
It looks like, I don't know, like monster truck's wet dream.
And it's also harvest time in the forests. Groups of axe-wielding men cut and prize the bark from cork oak trees. Portugal produces around half the world's cork.
And most of it is grown here in Alentejo. The rolling hills, the cork oaks and the animals and birds that live among them make up what's called the montado forests. That's what inspired Sograp's marketing campaigns from its Alentejo winery. Our first stop, Herdade do Peso.
This was the beginning. In the 90s, basically there was just this building prior to the acquisition.
The chief storyteller is Tiago Oliveira, the brand leader for Herdade do Peso, who took us for a drive around the company's estate here in Vidigueira.
We will stop now in a place where we can see all the property from the water reservoir to the winery.
Wow, this is a really large estate. How many hectares are there here? We're driving through them.
160 hectares with 140 hectares of red grape varieties and 20 of white grape varieties.
The whole estate is much bigger, but a third of it is being replanted with forests rather than grapes to promote biodiversity.
And we can stop here and look around. I was just...
Should we get out and have a look?
Yeah.
I think child lock's on here.
Ah, sorry. I have 2 kids.
That looks quite aggressive. What's going on down there?
That's the harvest machine. We do 2 types of harvest here, mechanical, as you can see there, and the manual one. You mentioned that it looks quite aggressive. I would say that it's aggressive because of the size of it, but when you are near it, it's really interesting to see how carefully that big beast handles the vine. So it's mechanical, it helps us a lot, but it preserves the vines in a very good way. Otherwise we wouldn't be using it.
Sorry, I've not seen one before.
No, it looks cool.
It's like, wow, what's it doing?
The harvest machine already passed through these corridors. What it does is just shakens everything.
Okay.
So you see the stems stay within the vine, but the grapes fall and the machine collects it. So basically, by the end of 3 or 4 rows, it dumps in the tractor only the grapes. It's state of the art.
Wow.
We can just get closer, it will be noisier, but...
It's very, very tall, isn't it? It's about...
Yeah, it is. You can see the size of the wheel is pretty much my size.
Yeah,
my
it's
height.
a huge machine. And now it's reversing to the big
I think
pickup.
I think it will now drop the...
Drop the grapes.
Oh, cool.
A large pile of grapes going into the back of that pickup truck. It's fantastic.
It's quite impressive. It looks like, I don't know, like a tractor, tank, moonlander, monster truck's wet dream.
It's like sci-fi.
Yeah, it really is like sci-fi.
But it's
Wow.
even more amazing by night. It starts working around 4 a.m.
Okay, wow.
And you only see the lights.
It basically straddles the whole row of grapevines and shakes off the grapes.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So that's one way of doing it.
and the other way, the traditional way, which is the one used for our reservas, parcelas and icon, is hand picking. One of the caveats of doing it with a machine is the fact that it drops the grapes in those containers.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that, but when you want to produce better wines, fine wines, you have to take into account that the weight of the grapes over each other will compromise them and will start squeezing them, and we want to preserve that. So when we are hand picking, we have small compartments with a maximum 20 kilos. That way we can protect the grapes up until the point that we start doing the vinification.
And so if you want to have a large volume of wine to sell, and obviously to sell it a little lower in price because it's more machined, it's more manhandled if you like, then this is how you would do it.
Correct, yet don't underestimate the cost of that machine.
Right, yeah, fair enough.
Because that's top of the art
Yeah, fair enough.
technology and it's quite expensive.
Yeah.
It's an impressive machine, harvesting quickly, elegantly and effectively on a huge scale.
But very different to the hand picking we were heading off to see next.
This dog, although he's barking, is very peaceful. It's called Prima, and it's the dog that is always near the ladies that take care of the vines.
Great.
They're there.
Right.
Amazing.
If you can collect, even if it's just 5 seconds or 10 seconds of them singing, it would be one of the most amazing fragments of the podcast.
Great. Can you ask them nicely?
Yeah, yeah. they are super friendly. Bom dia! Como estão? Tudo bem? Hoje trouxe aqui uns amigos ingleses. Não há câmaras, estão muito bonitas, mas não é preciso ficar assim a olhar.
You're looking great, but I'm afraid there aren't any cameras, he joked with them.
Vocês são bonitas.
We're working between 2 rows of vines, and every 1 meter there's a 20 kilo vat filled with grapes. So they've been picking all morning. So hundreds and hundreds of boxes filled with grapes ready to go to the winery.
Nós, quinta-feira passada, apanhámos 11.
She said last Thursday they picked 11 lots.
Yeah, she mentioned that in a good day, with good fruit like the ones that they are collecting today, they usually, each lady collects nearly a ton per day.
Yeah.
Wow. So a ton, if we divide
By
per
box?
20 kilos boxes, say 50 boxes
50 boxes.
each lady per day of work.
Amazing.
These are the women that are working with us for 20 and 30 years. And
Wow.
some of them were already here working in the property before Sograp came here. Segundo, obrigado.
The women had so far resisted Tiago's attempts to get them to sing, but before we left, he had one last go.
Lá morreu o rato na vidigueira, o vinho barato.
Leading by example. And just as it looked like he'd failed, it happened.
Já morreu o rato lá na vidigueira. Há vinho barato, já não há quem queira.
It's an old song they traditionally sing while picking the grape harvest in the Vidigueira wine region.
Lá na vidigueira já morreu o rato.
We all wanted Adu Peso hats like yours now, one of the women shouted. A great song, but not for free. That was amazing, thank you.
They made our day.
Yeah, fantastic. The way they were talking and interacting with you, it felt like they were quite comfortable around here.
They are very comfortable around themselves and with me too, because sometimes I just come here not to photograph, not to record anything, but just be with them to see if things are okay. And they really appreciate that, because in some companies, there are the ones that are just behind the screens and the ones that work in the field, and there is a huge gap between the teams. And I have more interaction with Luis, the winemaker, than the rest of the marketing team, because the brand, the essence of what we produce is produced here. That's where I need to be most of the time.
Great.
So where's the next stop?
The next stop will be just around on the other side of the road.
Okay.
It's called the Peso Dois. And the Peso Dois, it's the area in which we plant most of the vines that will sow Sossego and Trincabolotes. You will see that there are higher hills there.
Okay, so now we're getting into the details. The most well-known Haddad do Peso ranges of wines are called Sossego, with a huge oak tree on the front, symbolic of the Alentejo landscape.
In Portuguese, sossego means peace and quiet, feelings associated with the Alentejo. And then there's Trincabolotas, decorated with a black pig. It means acorn muncher, as the pigs love to eat them.
We started to think what is really authentic from Alentejo that might be endangered and needs to be protected. And we thought of the black pig. We call it Trincabolotas. And the funny part of the name has a lot of potential for us to play around with the communication, the advertising, and the funny part of it. If you go to our Instagram account of Trincabolotas, most of the posts is just humor of two pigs talking about different stuff. And we found really a niche with younger consumer of wines.
Sounds like a good opportunity for a clink.
And a think about the company that invented Mateus Rosé and is now Portugal's largest wine producer.
Sograp produces 20 million bottles of Mateus a year. That's one sold every second and a half. Wait for it, that's a lot of wine.
But they also produce Barca Velha, one of the finest and most expensive Portuguese wines. They own the port brands Sandeman and Ferreira, the mass-selling Gazela Vinho Verde, and a new wine sold in the US as Silk and Spice.
With a line, "to be discovered," it plays on the history of Portuguese explorers, still putting the marketing first, as they did with the Mateus bottle shaped like a soldier's flask.
It's not all marketing, of course. Their Alentejo wines celebrate what the region is famous for.
Something that grows on trees, keeps the wine fresh, and explains why we joined a small group of axe-wielding men in a forest.
We're just surrounded by thousands of cork oaks, and they're so beautiful. And right where we're standing, there's, I don't know, maybe 20, 30 guys working on cutting the cork off part of the trees, which they do every 9 years. I'd say that these cork oaks are probably, I don't know, 100 years old or something like that.
They're huge,
Yeah.
aren't they? Yeah, it's a massive area.
The axes are amazing. They've got this sort of fan-type blade and then a sharp point to the end of them. So they use the axe to cut and also to lever the cork off. But then they turn it round and use the handle to get the rest of it off. And I guess try and get them off in as big a piece as possible.
Yeah, and successfully. I can see that these guys know what they're doing.
After 50 years in the business, Antonio Freitas described the perfect plank for the finest cork stopper. It's about thickness, shape, density, and perfection.
He's pointing out gaps and fissures along the edge, which means this one's not as good.
Well, a good cutter is a guy who doesn't hurt a tree, who extracts the cork with less cuts and takes a lot of cork in a day, you know.
João Sobral is a cork buyer who knows that takes a lot of skill and experience. But he shares a problem with the wineries.
You know, this is one of the most paid jobs in agriculture and forests. But I don't have workers. And why? No one wants to work in agriculture. I think it's a social thing in Portugal. It is not well seen. And people prefer to live in urban centers than in the country.
Here comes the tractor.
And these guys are picking the bark up off the floor.
They used to dry out the cork planks for weeks in the fields, but now they're stacked up beautifully here on these trucks and taken straight to the factory.
And that's where we're headed to as well. Portugal's sprawling industrial cork complex near the northern city of Porto.
This is where the magic happens. So we're looking at those strips of the very best cork planks that you can think of, and we are looking at a series of cylindrical holes punched horizontally, never vertically, but horizontally on the cork plank.
Carlos de Jesus is head of marketing and communications at Amorim, the world's largest cork producer. They make more than 5.5 billion cork stoppers a year.
So take us to your best cork then, and show us why it's so good.
Okay, you maybe start to bother all your friends after this visit every time you open a bottle of cork.
That's true.
Because you're going to be able to recognize what a very good cork is from a everyday plonk cork. And whenever someone brings you a bottle that does not have that top-end cork, believe me, you're going to start noticing the difference. But when you talk about wine and still wine, you essentially have two different types of stopper. We have one that are carved as a single piece from the bark, the ones that we are watching now. And then you have corks that are made out of granules, which are in fact a byproduct of these strips of cork that we are watching now. In the cork industry, nothing, absolutely nothing is wasted. Even those granules, when they are so small that nothing else can be done with it, you can still use them as fuel.
Yes, they burn cork dust for heating. Once this machine compresses the granulated cork, it can be used for building insulation, floorboards, shock absorbers. It's used in cars, aircraft, and even space rocket nose cones.
You can feel this machine rumbling, can't you? It's actually like shaking.
But it's wine corks we're interested in, and one of the biggest threats to their bottle-stopping future is trichloroanisole, or TCA, the chemical which causes cork taint, the cardboardy taste of a wine that's been corked.
The human nose can spot 1 drop of TCA in 100 Olympic-sized swimming pools. So Amorim developed a machine accurate enough to find it, and another one to make sure the corks are completely cleaned of it.
This is a supercritical fluid technology reactor. And what comes out of it is the cleanest granules of cork or anything that you put in there that you can possibly make. And definitely no TCA whatsoever.
Today, I think that we can clearly say that TCA is something that is done and dealt with behind our back.
We met the cork empire's 4th-generation chief executive, António Rios de Amorim. He had to counter the threat of TCA as well as the rise of plastic corks and aluminium screw tops in the early 2000s.
That's one of the biggest shocks that we ever faced in our industry, because until then we thought that cork was good enough on the merits of being such a historic, sustainable material. But there was plenty of room for cork to improve. And that's what we have done in the investment that we've started to do in research and development, equipping the company with the best scientists. And this is why, from 2010, cork has not stopped gaining market share from alternative closures ever since.
How important is a good cork to a good bottle of wine?
It's everything. We absolutely need to guarantee that our cork is going to preserve all the positive aromas, all the positive sensory experiences that result from the long, passionate work of those people in viticulture, of those skilled, qualified and passionate people in winemaking.
Well, that's quite enough about cork. Let's get back to Herdade do Peso and our guide, Tiago Oliveira, to taste some wine and meet their winemaker, Luís Cabral de Almeida.
So what is this wine then that we're...
This wine, the Herdade do Peso Revelado.
So this is one of the higher-end red wines being produced at this winery. And according to Tiago, it's the perfect expression of the land and the terroir.
Encompasses everything that we talked previously. The respect for the nature, the biodiversity, this love and care that you watch on those ladies picking up the grapes, all this detailed work within the winery of vinifying small lots, then putting up together in a lovely way that provides us this freshness that Luís can talk us a little bit more. Luís, só fazendo aqui
And to Luís, can I clip this microphone on to you?
Thank you.
We were lucky enough to grab a few minutes over a glass of wine with top winemaker Luís Cabral de Almeida.
We haven't tried this wine yet. We were just starting to talk about it. Could you take us through a quick tasting of it to explain what we can smell?
First of all, thank you for coming.
Thank you very much for hosting us.
Thank you so much
Cheers.
for welcoming us here.
Cheers.
That wine is a blend of different varieties, but is mainly Alicante Boucher, which gives you body, color, fruit, Touriga Nacional, freshness, acidity, middle palate, and a small touch of Syrah, a small touch of, I don't know, right, but mainly is that.
And this is a lighter, it's different from what people might traditionally think of being a jammy Alentejo kind of wine.
Yes, it's not jammy, definitely not, because we try to pick the grapes in the right time.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, very important.
We've seen the land, and we've seen the farmers, the women picking. That's part of it, but the other part of it is what you do. How you blend, how you choose, how you make this wine.
When we design that vineyard, when we choose the varieties, when we choose the trelling system, we made the wine. Every year we try to bottle that diversity you saw in our estate. We try to have a minimal intervention.
Mm-hmm.
For us, we help nature to produce the grapes we think are the best for our style. And after that, we take fruit, we put, and we try not to have big intervention. It's so easy like that.
We've been having a little tour of the facilities here, and it seems that you've got lots of tools, though. You've got things you can use to bring your skill into this operation to help give that beautiful characteristic of the grape. Can you explain what those tools are and how you use them to make the wine that you want to make?
If you have stainless steel vats, or concrete tanks, or oak vats, there are 3 different tools to complex the wines. You have like a museum. If you have more, how do you say instruments? If you have more instruments.
The more instruments you have, the more complexity you can add.
The more complexity you can have. The music in is like here. It's the same. Different materials means you could have more complexity.
What would you like to say to a new consumer about Alentejo wines and perhaps Herdade do Peso in particular? What will they find?
Well, first of all, I invite the new consumers to visit Alentejo, to feel Alentejo, to feel the history from Roman time. Alentejo is, you can say, is the new world wine producing regions in Portugal. 40 years ago, we began a new wave with the new varieties, new viticulture. In Alentejo wines, you have more consistency in quality than other regions. It's the first advantage for Alentejo consumers. Always you have a good wine. If you buy a Alentejo wine, you have a good wine. It was the first wave. The last wave is more or less 10 years ago or 12 years ago, is going deep in our vineyards. We have fantastic everyday wines, all of us. Nowadays, the big challenge is we, all of the producers, we are working deeper in our roots, in our soils, in our diversity, to vinify everything separately and could have a special things to offer to the consumer.
We love supping Sograp's Trincabalottas wines, and it's exciting to hear there are more great wines to come from Herdade do Peso.
Thanks so much to the winemaker Luís Cabral de Almeida and Tiago Oliveira for taking the time, giving us a tour and getting the wine harvesting women to sing.
And of course, thanks to everyone at Amorim, especially Rafael Alves da Rocha, who arranged our factory and harvest visits.
And thanks to you for listening to another episode of our Big Portuguese Wine Adventure. Next time we will be visiting the vineyard that some of Portugal's best winemakers recommend, to learn more about a French grape that Portugal has made its own.
Do check out the Big Portuguese Wine Adventure online, and please sign up to hear extra reviews and interviews. Bye for now.